So I used to want to try and start YouTube videos with a big, loud intro, like straight into the point. But I kind of realized that that just wasn't me. And I was listening to, I think it's Tom Nosk. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he was talking about how when it comes to creating content, it can be really hard when we're trying to be more than we are, when we're trying to be what I thought someone we're not, essentially. And this really resonated with me because what I believe is we have the kind of like whatever version of ourselves, the version, we might have around our family, the people we're most comfortable with. It's just like, whatever. Don't care what I sound like. Don't care what I look like. Don't care. I just feel like I'm not being judged. For example, there's actually quite a few of my vlogs I guess that is that version of me. In those vlogs is the whatever version, particularly camping. It's almost like it's too hard to be anything other while you're camping. And then there's the version of ourselves we aspire to be. And then there's the version of ourselves we think we should be. And that's the version that gets mixed up with the version that we aspire to be. Because we think to achieve the goals we want to achieve, we have to be a certain way. This was so evident for me when I first started in leadership, is I had this perceived idea about what a leader was, what a good manager was, and having to show up in that way, talk like that, dress like that, behave like that, make decisions like that, lead like that. And the more I tried to lead or manage like someone else, the more exhausting it got for me. And the more I just accepted how I did things without judgment, the easier things worked out. And it's the same with any goal or area in our lives. There's the version we think we should be, which can be quite exhausting, actually. For example, now running my own businesses, for a long time I thought the version that I should be, presenter mode, wearing a suit, the, Lila Hermosi look, which I love for her, but it's just so not me. Like this, the version of myself I aspire to be is pretty much this, just maybe like a bigger room. And when I realized that actually I don't need to be anyone else other than myself, then everything just starts getting a whole lot easier. Creating anything starts getting a whole lot easier, particularly if you're, the face of a company or a business or a movement. Being yourself gets so much easier because trying to be someone you're not, one, is exhausting, and it always feels like you're not quite good enough because you're always having to prove yourself that you're this version of you when you don't even feel like you should be that version of you. Which leads me to the point of this video, which is the whole concept around being more of yourself, identity. Identity has definitely come up a lot in pop philosophy recently, or maybe I've just heard it more. The whole idea about identity shifts, identity work, being a version of yourself, becoming a version of yourself. And back when I first started my self-development journey, mid-20s probably, I honestly was so afraid that by doing this work that I would become someone that I'm not, that somehow it would change me and then I would lose myself on the journey to find myself. But what I experienced was actually the opposite. The real deep inner work, the real deep self-development work, what it actually does is it strips back the layers. It strips back the layers that we've picked up throughout our lives from society, from, other people that we thought might fit, but then we just never took it off. What it also does is it breaks away that armor, the armor we're wearing under those layers that we've picked up from society, the armor that is protecting us in case someone sees through those layers. And so when I stripped that all back, when I broke that armor back down, what I realized is I felt more like myself than I had in so long. I remember there was a time where I would think back to my early 20s, because there was a period in my early 20s where life just felt so good. I felt so alive. I felt like it was like a period between, coming out of, ending teenage, ending high school, accepting myself. But then it's like also before responsibility kicks in. So it's, it was a really fun time. But also at that time, what I didn't realize is I was chasing a lot of highs, escaping, traveling, escaping myself. And all that fast living came to a dead end, I suppose. And because I'd been living so fast and on such a high, that of course came crashing down. It came so far down that I reached a point of depression. And throughout that year, to get me through that, I really told this story. So, I didn't see anyone at the time, but I was waking up with thinking, what's the point? Should I even bother? Like, why would I even bother? I just want to lie here and do nothing. Like, it was at the point, it was so in the depths of darkness that it was like, I can't even be bothered to do anything. I can't even be bothered to get out of bed. And what got me through that period was having just fortunately I had a job with people that were relying on me. And so because I couldn't bring myself to care about myself, I could still kind of bring myself to care about someone else because it was like outside of me. And so what really got me through that period is like each day, get up, show up, get up, show up, get up, show up. And I got into this routine. I'd wake up, hate the world, hate myself, feel like that wasn't me, and then tell myself, get up, show up, get up, show up. And so over time, I thought I was healing because I was starting to feel better. But at that time, I was really just starting to layer on the armor. And so I went from depression to disconnection. But I didn't realize it was disconnection at the time because I felt better. I was like, I'm okay. I remember someone asking me like towards the end of that year, how are you? And I'm like, I'm actually okay. But of course, what I thought was the rock bottom wasn't the real rock bottom. Because I was so disconnected, I kept making bad decisions and things. And what my career was going up, but every other area of my life was going down. And then I hit what I thought was a rock bottom. And then I hit what was actually a rock bottom. And then that's where my self-development journey begins. And so to bring this story back around, essentially, there was the fun, loving, happy version of myself, went on a bit of a journey, found self-development, was afraid that I was going to turn to someone else. But through doing that work and getting rid of those layers and the armor that I had built, I suddenly felt like that fun, loving, happy version again. I suddenly felt like myself again. I was reconnected with who I was, but now I'd also reached that point having developed, the self-acceptance, the self-love, the self-respect, the resilience, the discernment, the boundaries to go along with it. And so it wasn't just the being myself and then bad things happening because I wasn't totally accepted. It was now I could be myself and I was resilient to outside judgment, to things going wrong, to challenges, to not go back into my shell as soon as someone didn't like me or I got rejected or I was too weird or whatever. And so where identity work is really powerful, when I say identity work, I mean changing the self-perceptions, the self-image, the beliefs, the behaviors, the underlying worldview we have about ourselves and our external environment. Where this is really powerful is once you've stripped back the layers, the social programming, if you will, broken down the armor that has been numbing, that has been disconnecting you from yourself. It's almost like now the wardrobe's empty, right? You've cleared out all the old and broken things. And then it's like, okay, So now that I've reconnected with who I feel I'm authentically am, oh my God, I really don't like using that word. Why do I keep using authentic? Reconnecting with the version of yourself that feels like home. Once you've reconnected with the version of yourself that feels like home, or you've reached a point where you feel just so self-assured and safe in just being yourself, now you can decide and curate who you want to be and who you want to become. Because as opposed to becoming the version of yourself that wore all those social layers and reached a point where they didn't recognize themselves, it's now you've stripped all that back and it's like, okay, who do I want to become? Who am I going to choose to become? What version of myself am I going to choose to bring forward, to focus on, to curate, to grow into? And this can be as simple as literally questioning your own thoughts or planting the seed of who you want to become. For example, when I was on my fitness journey, which went for a really long time. Oh, and this is the other thing about becoming aware of the identity you associate with, is on that fitness journey lasted so long. And I remember, I think that's when I first read Atomic Habits. And it's interesting, right? Because James Clear talks about identity like in the first or second chapter. And I'm pretty sure I read it and I was like, oh yeah, who do I identify as, or what do I identify as? And at the time on my fitness journey, I was so proud to be talking about partying, but it was like I was kind of secretive about my health and fitness. Like I was embarrassed to admit that I loved working out, that I loved eating healthy, but I was proud to admit that I liked partying. So I was like, okay, yeah, like who am I more happy to associate with? I'm obviously more happy to identify as someone who parties than I am health and fitness. No wonder this health and fitness thing is so hard and I keep partying. So it was even just that shift in my mind where it's like, okay, how about I start talking about myself as someone who works out? How about I start actually being okay that people know me as someone that likes to work out? And even that started to shift so much. Like if I think about it, it's so subtle, just like that mental switch, that mental pivot from like, you know what, I have been perceiving myself like that. I actually want to perceive myself like that now. Because from that point on, it's so cliche to say, but it's true. Like I started getting the results I wanted. I started staying consistent with my habits. I ended up on a trajectory to a point where, one, I'm super happy and proud to be seen as someone that's into health and fitness. And two, it's so easy for me these days. It's the same with relationships. I was single for like over 10 years. And then I realized that I saw myself as someone that's single and not as someone who is in relationships. I realized this because I was like, here I am like single forever. And I've got all these friends that just go from one relationship to the next. And it's like, yeah, because they probably perceive themselves as a girlfriend or a boyfriend. They probably perceive themselves as someone who is in relationships. Where it's like, I had never perceived myself as someone in a relationship. So I changed that. And, within 6 months, I met my boyfriend. So amazing. Same with career. So I was working at a job as an employee. I had my side hustle, which is now my main hustle. And I realized that I was still, again, talking about myself as an employee as opposed to an entrepreneur. It was so uncomfortable for me to tell people that I have businesses. I was so much more proud to tell people I have a job. And so I switched that. And then 6 months later, I've left. I'm done. Like I'm not an employee anymore. I'm an entrepreneur. And so these tiny shifts, these tiny pivots in just my self-perception has put me on trajectories where my life is completely different. It's the same, literally everything, like everything in your life, whatever it is you want to improve, notice how you are perceiving yourself in regards to that goal. Are you proud to talk about yourself as someone who is working towards that goal, as someone who is into health and fitness, as someone who enjoys wealth, as someone who is an entrepreneur or a creative or is a loving partner or, loves talking to people. Because all the ways you are proud to talk about yourself are the ways you are perceiving yourself. And so, because I'm impatient and I know this works, I'm now intentionally shifting my identity. I, of course, love hypnosis because it's straight to the source of your subconscious, where you can rewrite your beliefs, your self-talk, your self-perception. I do know that hypnosis has been found to be one of the best ways to practice being someone else, but not in the way that I was talking about, like being the version of ourselves that we think we should be, but it's trying on a different identity, trying on and imagining yourself as the person that is fit and healthy, as the person that is wealthy. And then if you want, of course, accepting that into your subconscious programming, so that when you move through the world, you consciously behave and make decisions based on that identity. Think building inner architecture to support the outer actions. That's what subconscious work is. And so you've got hypnosis, you've got journaling. I like timeline work specifically for this as well. So like timeline therapy and a child work. But it really is as simple as just questioning the judgments and beliefs you have about yourself. And even if this video is just a reminder to make that pivot in your self-perception, a year from now, you may look back and think, oh yeah, I remember that point when I decided differently, and now look at my life. The key is, once you make that pivot, to not turn back every time you hit resistance. Because changing your identity is in itself a mini habit cycle. So what I mean by changing your habit in itself is a mini habit cycle is the following. So in Atomic Habits, James Clear shows this diagram where you've got identity in the center, processes such as habits, and then the outcomes. And that the most effective way to change the outcomes is to go from identity to outcome, as opposed to outcome to identity. Now, if you're changing the identity at this level, it could include asking yourself better questions, reframing thoughts, essentially changing your beliefs through self-awareness, such as if you were wanting outcomes in health, the processes would be your certain habits, your workout systems and schedules, and then the identity would be the mindset you have around those workouts and those habits, such as I'm a healthy person, I stick to my workouts, I love working out. But essentially that requires self-awareness to catch those thoughts in the moment, to catch the beliefs in the moment, and to constantly reframe and rewrite what those beliefs and self-talk are. When I talk about changing this piece, the identity as is a mini habit cycle in itself. So you have, again, identity, processes, and outcome. Like this. So in this regard, the outcome is an identity shift. The processes would be hypnosis, subconscious reprogramming, and the identity in this regard is a shift in foundational identity. So whereas this, if it's related to just the health and habits, you might start to perceive yourself as someone who's fit and healthy. But to really make the processes work and the outcomes work is also seeing yourself as someone who follows through, who's consistent with their habits, someone who continues when you aren't getting the results you're expecting or you're wanting. So these are the foundational beliefs about who you are as a person. This could also relate to your nervous system, emotions, and anything at a subconscious level. And the thing is, when I break it up like this, of course it may look like a lot, but the thing is, this kind of all happens at once. And you can choose to just do the standard way, which is slower, or the amplified way, using these processes that essentially do hack your subconscious, for lack of a better word, which create the outcome of a shifted identity, which then feeds into your processes and your habits that then create the outcome of the results you're after. And over time, this becomes a cycle anyway. So the better the outcomes, the more it contributes to you affirming who you're becoming. And the more it contributes to who you're affirming you're becoming at a conscious level, and then it seeps into your subconscious. So it's just one big feedback loop. The reason I talk about this mini habit cycle for your identity as well is that this can take a long time at a conscious level. And so by adding in the subconscious layer and working through that, so this could also be journaling, coaching, and creating this foundational identity, it becomes foundational to all goals as opposed to just the immediate goals. So to help you start connecting your identity to the things you want to achieve, I've created a vision board with a section for just that. But if you want more than just a template, which I know I often do, check out the other links in the description or just stay connected to keep the momentum going.